I'm Jonathan Handel, host of Look at LA, and welcome to the program. Our guest today is Mike Feuer, state representative, state assembly member from the area that I happen to live in, and that includes West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and portions of Hollywood, and a bunch of other related areas. You are watching Look at LA, perhaps live, perhaps at lookatla.tv, or perhaps elsewhere. But lookatla.tv will get you to the show. I blog on the Huffington Post and at jhandel.com, and welcome your visits there as well. A word about tomorrow. We have another show at 2 o'clock tomorrow on Proposition 4. We have representatives, or a representative from the No on 4 campaign. That's a proposition that would restrict minors' access to abortion. We are going to go for probably about 20 to 30, 35 minutes, and if we've got people watching live who have questions, you can type them in the chat room. I want to thank my technical producer, Neil D. Hunt. We wouldn't be here today without his help, and also the assistance of Jody Litvak. Thank you both. And with no further ado, what I'd like to do is, Mike, welcome you to the show.
It's good to be here.
Thanks. So yeah, you've been a state rep for how long now?
A couple years.
Let's talk about some of the things that you've have done over the last legislative season. And one of those is what's referred to as green chemistry. Right. A bill of yours and a companion bill were signed by the governor. What is green chemistry? What's that all about?
Sure. There was a news article last year in the Times on the front page that really set out a pretty horrifying scenario. The world's leading scientists issued a report that said that kids in the womb are pre-programmed to get cancer and diabetes and other serious illnesses. And the scientists postulated you can never unprogram them. Why are they programmed this way? Because their moms are exposed to toxics in everyday life while they're carrying the kids. Well, we needed something to break the link between toxics and cancer. So last year I introduced a sweeping piece of legislation that made it through most of the process, but on the second to last day of the session, it got defeated with a stream of industry lobbyists, enabling that bill to go down by a vote. I came back this year, and this year we succeeded. We succeeded at what is the most comprehensive bill in the United States when it comes to dealing with this extremely important and not well-publicized issue. And so here's what the bill does. The bill gives California scientists authority that most people think the state already has, and that is determine what chemicals are dangerous. Then with that information, determine what alternatives to the use of those chemicals exist in commonplace consumer products. With that in place, decide should we be labeling products differently, all the way to potentially banning products that contain dangerous chemicals. So for example, in the past year, there's a toy that my kids have played with, Thomas the Tank Engine. Well, Thomas the Tank Engine is a great toy, except that these toys had lead in them at potentially dangerous levels. Folks thought the state could take authority to take these things off the shelves. The state had no authority to do that. Under my bill, it would. So in daily life...
Under the law that passed?
Under the law that passed, it would. Okay. And so this is kind of one of those transformative pieces of legislation. You know, it's interesting, in my constituency, most folks don't think very often about their state representatives, and when they do, they're not sure how much we matter to their daily lives. So in my career, what I've tried to do is zero in on bills that will have a meaningful impact on the daily lives of people throughout the state, and especially my constituents. And this one, I hope, is one of them. I'm very proud of it.
How does this relate to Prop 65?
65 is very different. 65 is a warning statute. It simply says if there is a chemical that is present from a long list, you must warn the public that it's there. Whereas my legislation says, with regard to chemical X, the state could determine that this chemical ought not be in a consumer product at all and take it off the shelf. It's a much more far-reaching step. It goes well beyond what a limited warning statute would be, and actually deal with tangible action to regulate these products that contain dangerous chemicals.
Does that mean that if, we've heard a lot about products from China in the last few months, containing dangerous chemicals, pet foods, kids' products and things. Does that mean the state could take those products off the market?
Yeah, it could.
And even though that's international commerce, I mean, is there a problem with the federal government having authority there?
No, I'm confident that there would not be. The term for your viewers would be, is the state preempted from doing this by federal rules?
Right.
And the answer is, from everything we've been able to see, no. So this authority is really important. It's important for kids, it's important for seniors, both of whom are what are called sensitive populations and potentially more vulnerable to the dangers from some of these chemicals. And by the way, I should say, I gave a speech yesterday to a group of chemical industry representatives in San Diego about this issue. This is not something that should erode our economic horsepower here in California. We should be using this approach to create a market that California companies can take advantage of for green chemicals. That is to say, for alternatives to some of the things that are more toxic, for which is going to be a huge market in the future. We should be on the cutting edge of that marketplace in California, be the innovators to whom others need to turn, because this is going to be a trend that not only sweeps the country, but the world. And why we should be first, and our manufacturers should benefit from that.
Is there some synergy or some provisions in the bill that, in fact, would help jumpstart research of that sort or corporate development?
There is. Not so much in my bill per se, but the companion bill you mentioned. The companion bill creates what is called a Toxic Information Clearinghouse. It's a fancy way of saying we're going to take the chemicals of which we're aware, identify what their hazards are or are not, and make that information available as widely as possible. With that information, companies can determine, well, this chemical is more harmful, this substance is potentially more beneficial with fewer side effects. Let's shift to this one instead of using this one. And I should tell you that many businesses find that when they use chemicals, it's more expensive than when they use things that are less dangerous, because there are costs of shipping, there are costs of disposal, there are all kinds of expenses to be taken into account that can be diminished if people use less toxic alternatives.
In terms of cost, though, I mean, does this bill add cost to the manufacturing process and
Nope.
cost of products?
No. I mean, we'll see what happens down the road when alternatives are arrived upon for the most dangerous things now. But I'm optimistic, actually, this is going to diminish costs over time.
Huh? In what way?
Well, again, because the use of toxics is itself so expensive. I'll give you an example that's in place that demonstrates this. In Massachusetts, there is a law called the Toxics Use Reduction Law. Now, that's a law I actually sought to replicate last year in California, the essence of which is the more toxics you use in Massachusetts, the greater the fee that you pay to the government. The government has created an institute there to provide industry with guidance as to alternatives. This approach has been in place for 20 years. It's been beneficial to industry because the fund that has been created has established an institute that has saved business money, as alternatives to toxics cost less in light of the disposal and other kinds of manufacturing, other costs that are created using toxics. So I think that the experience in Massachusetts is something we can learn from here.
And what about at the federal level, the EPA and the Consumer Product Safety Commission? I mean, do they?
Consumer products, not so much. There's actually another law, the Toxic Substances Control Act, what's called TSCA at the federal level, that has been the governing principle for most toxics rules at the national level for several decades. It is a profoundly weak law. Among the weaknesses in the law is you have to establish all kinds of thresholds before you can even begin to regulate a chemical. And many chemicals have been grandfathered in as of the date of the statute's enactment back in the 1970s. As a result, they can do nothing with regard to a huge class of some of the more dangerous chemicals we have. It is widely agreed that the federal approach has been so ineffective that this approach in California can be a really meaningful alternative and a model for what we do in other states around the country.
And there's no federal preemption problem with the EPA either?
No.
And other states, now you mentioned Massachusetts, are there any other states that have legislation similar to this?
Maine has been a forward-thinking state on this issue, but there haven't been too many states that have gone this direction. And I'll tell you, when this law passed in California, the Times called it the most comprehensive law in the nation. So we're on the right track.
And establishing leadership, essentially.
You know, part of my job, I think, is to identify cutting-edge ideas, translate them into tangible ways to make people's lives better, and then make them replicable so that around the country we can be doing the same things. That's what makes this kind of job meaningful.
Thank you very much for being on Look at LA.
It's my pleasure. Good
Thanks,
to be
Mike.
here.